Chung.
Oh, Chung, Chung. And so why is that interesting spelling though?
Yes. So the lore in my family is that when we immigrated to the US, the immigration officer, that's how they spelled it on our paperwork.
Ah, that's how most of our immigrants have been, right? There's a weird spelling.
That's right.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Um, it is almost time. We're going to begin and we're going to start with your presentation. And it's a really important matter, so we appreciate your coming and joining us and edifying us on what's going on. And I don't know if you're going to be able to tell us some new developments in Alzheimer's and what we can look forward to. So we're really looking forward to it. So thank you.
Yes, I've been asked to talk on the disease modifying therapy that is now available for Alzheimer's disease. So that will be the main focus.
Super. Very good.
Could you just remind me how much time I have?
Yeah, we usually have about 40 minutes. And then we have the rest of the time we're going to talk about the bills that in our package, but maybe about 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so, and then
Okay,
and answers.
very good. Should I get started?
Sure. Let me just open up though
Okay.
first and we can start. Okay. Let me aloha everyone and good afternoon. This is our December meeting of our Kupuna Caucus. We're very pleased today to address Alzheimer's, a very important issue facing our Kupuna. And we're fortunate to have Dr. Abraham Chung from Queens Medical Center who tell us about new developments in Alzheimer's treatment. So he has a lot to tell us, so I'm not gonna delay any longer and just present to you, Dr. Chung.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for having me. I will share my screen here. You should be able to see my slide. So the title of the talk is Disease Modifying Therapy in Alzheimer's Disease. Let's see, I do not have any financial disclosures. And this gentleman is Dr. Alzheimer. He was a doctor of psychiatry and neuropathology in Germany who worked with this patient. She started developing memory problems late in life. She was forgetful. She was having trouble with her language function. She wasn't going to sleep at night, becoming really agitated. That should sound kind of familiar. It is what we call Alzheimer's disease based on the name of this doctor. Well, what happened was eventually, when this patient died, Dr. Alzheimer, after getting appropriate permission from the family, studied her brain. And what he discovered was that there was a good deal of brain atrophy compared to someone who had a normal life. People with Alzheimer's disease have significant shrinkage of their brain. And in addition, when the brain tissue was studied under the microscope, there were two abnormal findings, and he described that. The common one is amyloid plaques, which is what most people are familiar with. And there is also a second protein that builds up in the brains of patients who have Alzheimer's disease, the tau protein, and that shows up as neurofibrillary tangles. And this observation and publication of that information led to our conceptualization of this disease that we refer to as Alzheimer's disease. So, what happens in patients who have Alzheimer's disease? So in this cartoon, you can see that with aging, with everyone, there is decline in cognitive function that happens later in life. But people who have Alzheimer's disease, that pace of decline goes faster. And so later in life, you can see that there's a very clear difference between someone who has normal age-related memory loss compared to someone who has Alzheimer's disease. And this diagnosis of Alzheimer's dementia, it goes through different stages. If you consider this red line as the point where the diagnosis of dementia is made, initially there's minimal degrees of functional impairment, but they're forgetful. That's the mild stage of dementia. As they progress to the moderate stage of dementia, there's more memory loss and more functional decline. And as they move on to the severe stage of dementia, they become incapacitated, really relying on others for just about everything. And prior to this dementia phase, there is this concept of mild cognitive impairment where you can detect memory loss by testing, but they're not functionally impaired as yet. And so our understanding of how Alzheimer's disease develops is this. In the beginning, people are cognitively normal. Later in life, they start to show signs of mild cognitive impairment, and that may progress further to the dementia diagnosis. But long before you notice any kind of a clinical problem, there's this accumulation of beta amyloid, the amyloid plaques in the brain. That happens first. And then you see the neurofibrillary tangles accumulating. And after those things develop, you start to see that the brain is degenerating, it's atrophying. And subsequent to that, you start to notice that there's memory decline. And if enough memory deterioration happens, they become functionally impaired. That is what happens with Alzheimer's disease. And the problem is that this is very common. If you go to the website for the local chapter of Alzheimer's Association, it says that nearly 100,000 Kupuna and others in Hawaii are affected by Alzheimer's disease or other forms of dementia. And the fact of the matter is that of the different dementias, it is Alzheimer's disease that is most common. Yes, there are other conditions like frontotemporal dementia or Lewy body dementia and others that are more rare. Alzheimer's and also vascular dementia, but Alzheimer's disease make up the majority of the cases of patients who have dementia. So this is a really big problem. And indeed, in the state of Hawaii, as of 2020, more than 31,000 people aged 65 years old or older had diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. That is a staggering statistic. So when somebody gets diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, what can we do? Well, we prescribe symptomatic treatment. And these are the standard medicines that's been available for quite some time. Some of these names probably sound familiar to you, like donepezil, brand name is Aricept, or memantine, the brand name is Namenda. These have been around for a while, but they're symptomatic treatment. They're not disease-modifying therapy, which is the point of this presentation today. So what is the distinction? If you think of this graph as over time, cognitive function declining, and that's what you expect to see in someone who has untreated Alzheimer's disease. When you give them symptomatic treatment while they're receiving the medicine, they're symptomatically better, maybe to a modest degree. But regardless of that symptomatic benefit that the patient is getting, the decline over time, the disease progression, it is not changed from what you expect to see with an untreated patient. So that is symptomatic treatment. It hasn't altered the progression of the disease. What we're hoping for is disease-modifying therapy. What that means is, compared to what would happen in someone that is not treated, the medicine actually alters the disease course and the patient declines more slowly. This is something that has not been available previous to present day. But I'm happy to report that there are medicines that can actually do that in Alzheimer's disease. The first such medicine was named aducanumab. Unfortunately, it was discontinued as of this year and is no longer available on the market. But lecanemab received full FDA approval in 2023. It is the medicine that's being used widely. It is even available here in Hawaii, and patients are receiving it. The other option is donanemab, which just received the full approval from the FDA this year. And there may be patients who are going to be receiving that choice in the future. So clinical trials have shown that both with lecanemab and donanemab, there is a disease-modifying effect. Unfortunately, it's not a cure. It doesn't make people better. Even with the treatment, the memory declines over time. But the good news is that there's clearly a disease-modifying effect, that the pace of the progression of the disease is slowed down when people are given these medicines. But there are challenges associated with offering these medicines to patients. First of all, there's question of eligibility. It is only given to people who have Alzheimer's disease, because what it does is it clears away the amyloid plaques that build up in brains of patients who have Alzheimer's disease. So even if there's proven dementia, if that dementia is caused by some other condition, like frontotemporal dementia, vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, this medicine would not help in any way. So it is only for people who have Alzheimer's disease. And it is only available for people who are still in the early stage of Alzheimer's disease. If the diagnosis is made later on, when the patient has reached moderate stage dementia or severe or advanced dementia, it is too late to offer this treatment. Also, the medicine is expensive, and the insurances have not all agreed to cover the cost of the medicine. Medicare was the first to announce that they will cover the cost. HMSA has recently announced that they will cover this treatment. We're still waiting to hear the announcements from other insurance companies about whether they will cover this treatment for people who get diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. And the other issue is that even with insurance coverage, it's not 100%. Medicare, for example, covers 80% of the cost. And when we're talking about treatment that is expected to cost tens of thousands of dollars, 20% of tens of thousands of dollars is still a lot of money, and that pushes it out of range for a lot of patients, even if they're eligible for the treatment. The other issue is that, as you can imagine, late in the course of disease, it's fairly easy to tell the difference between someone who has normal age-related memory loss and dementia. But because we're talking about treating only those patients who are in the early stages, well, the earlier you go in the disease course, the difference between normal aging and other issues compared to Alzheimer's disease, it's very hard to tell. So what that means is that we need another way to make sure that the diagnosis is correct. And that means using biomarkers. And so the gold standard for diagnosing Alzheimer's disease is a PET scan that stains for the amyloid deposition in the brain. So you can see in these two cases, someone who does not have amyloid deposition have these cooler colors showing up on their scan, green and blue. But another patient who does have Alzheimer's disease, they show up with brighter colors, orange and red. You can tell the difference between someone who has Alzheimer's disease and someone who is normal. So when you take two patients who are earlier in the course of the disease, that they're both in the mild cognitive impairment phase, they're just having a little bit of memory loss, but they're still functional in every way. Well, if one person shows a scan that looks normal compared to another patient who has a scan that looks abnormal, even in that early stage, you can tell pretty clearly who will go on and have Alzheimer's disease versus someone who may not be afflicted with such a condition. So this amyloid PET scan is the gold standard for making diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease early in the course. The bad news is that this amyloid PET scan is currently not available in the state of Hawaii. But the Queen's Medical Center is working on developing that technology. We're hoping to have it available for our patients sometime in 2025. Until then, the only other reliable way of making diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease is through the lumbar puncture procedure that people call spinal tap. A needle is inserted into the back, sample of the fluid that bathes the brain is collected, and it is analyzed to see if there's appropriate amyloid content and tau content, and that can help discern whether the person has Alzheimer's disease or not. It is more invasive than getting a scan. Many people don't like the idea of having a needle stuck in their back. So that is a bit of a barrier, but right now that is what we have available to make the diagnosis. And then once the diagnosis is made, the treatment involves infusion of the medicine into the blood. This is not a pill that people can take at home. And so with lecanemab, the infusion is done every 2 weeks. With donanemab, the infusion is done every 4 weeks. And this treatment continues on for a while. 18 months for lecanemab, 76 weeks for donanemab. And so this is a huge time commitment that the patient will need to put into their treatment, and that can be a barrier as well. And then a concept that we worry about is that patients receiving this type of treatment, they can develop a complication, something that we call ARIA. It stands for amyloid-related imaging abnormalities. And so for both lecanemab and donanemab, a good number of patients can actually develop this problem. Fortunately, most patients are asymptomatic, meaning that these problems are detected in brain scans, and with discontinuation of the treatment, hopefully they won't have any serious consequences. But unfortunately, some of the patients who develop this complication can have very devastating outcome. There have been several people that actually died during the clinical trials for these medicines. And so what are the findings related to this ARIA? There are two main findings. One is brain swelling or cerebral edema, and the other is bleeding that shows up as microhemorrhages. So this is a patient who was involved in a clinical trial, and these are scans that were obtained before they received the treatment and the scans that were obtained after the treatment. And I wonder if you can see through the projection that before the treatment, there are these sulci or grooves on the surface of the brain that is supposed to be there. But when they developed ARIA, the surface of the brain looks rather smooth, and you can't really see those crevices as well. That indicates that there's brain swelling going on in that area. And then also these arrows point out the places where there are the microhemorrhages. They're tiny little black holes that you can see in the MRI images. And these pictures may not look very impressive, but the fact of the matter is that if you get higher resolution images, you can see that there are holes in the brain. And for this particular case, they were able to collect brain tissue and they can show you what those microhemorrhages look like. You can clearly see that there's a good deal of damage that's happening in the brain. Even if it doesn't look very impressive in an MRI scan, these microhemorrhages, no one wants that happening in their brain. And so as a safety protocol, anyone receiving these medicines have a built-in schedule to get MRI scans. MRI scans are done regardless of whether the patient is complaining about symptoms or not. This is done periodically to look for signs of this ARIA. And if there is that complication, we would stop the treatment in those patients. One interesting thing about ARIA that has come up is that there appears to be a genetic predisposition as to whether the patients are more likely to have that complication. So there's this gene called ApoE. It has been linked to risk of getting Alzheimer's disease in the first place. But genetic testing for making a diagnosis has not been very useful, and it's not a test that's done very often in terms of making the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. On the other hand, what was found in the clinical trials for these medicines is that people who have the form of ApoE gene, the E4 variant, if they have those copies of the genes, they're more likely to end up with the ARIA complication. So in this data for lecanemab, compared to someone that doesn't have any copies of the E4, compared to those that have one copy and two copies, you can see that the risk of ARIA happening really increased quite a bit. And it's the same kind of result that was found with donanemab as well. Compared to someone that doesn't have any copies, with those that have one copy of the E4, compared to two copies of the E4, the risk goes up significantly when this genetic abnormality is found. And so that's another consideration of what we need to look at before we start treatments on patients to make sure that we have a good understanding of what their risks are for developing this ARIA complication. So the summary with regard to the disease-modifying therapy that's available now for Alzheimer's disease, the good thing is that it is truly disease-modifying. It slows down the pace of the decline that happens due to Alzheimer's disease. The bad is that it's limited to people who have early stage Alzheimer's disease only. And right now, it requires a spinal tap to be identified as a candidate for the treatment. It does require genetic testing to see what their ApoE genotype is. It is a big time commitment with a lot of trips to the infusion center, and it can be a big financial burden for those that decide to proceed with the treatment. And then the ugly part of all this is the ARIA. We have to be very careful about that complication in patients who are receiving the treatment. So for the near future, what can we expect in terms of improvement on this current state of treatment for Alzheimer's disease? Well, we hope that the early stage Alzheimer's disease diagnosis will be made easier. We are doing an awareness campaign, not just neurology, but a lot of the geriatricians are involved as well. And not just at Queen's Medical Center, but very respected doctors like Huidi Shu from the Hawaii Pacific system. We are trying to get the word out that there's this new treatment available and people should look into whether they are qualified to receive the medicine or not. In terms of the issue with the spinal tap, as I mentioned, Queen's Medical Center is hoping to have the amyloid PET scan available by sometime in 2025. And then besides that, I was asked to mention that there is research going on with regard to a blood test that may confirm diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. The results are coming back saying that it is fairly accurate, and we're waiting for FDA approval to start using that instead of a spinal tap to make the diagnosis. And so when that becomes available, that'll certainly make life easier as well. With regard to the time commitment of all the trips that the patients will need to make to the infusion center, the company that makes lecanemab is actually working on an injection form where the patient can put the medicine under the skin at home on their own without having to go to the infusion center. And eventually, when the FDA approves that version, then hopefully the patients will not be required to make all those trips to the infusion center. And with regard to the financial burden, right now we only have two health insurances that are offering to cover the cost of this treatment. I am hopeful that in time, the rest of the insurances will agree to pay for this treatment as well. So that is a very quick synopsis of where we are with regard to disease-modifying treatment that is available for Alzheimer's disease. And I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
We have an emergency in the building, but we will continue. I just want to open it up to questions. If you have any questions, just raise your hand or raise your hand in the chat. Do you have any? No. Says. Okay, so when you say the cost of it is high, let me just ask you, how high is the cost?
Yes, so what I'm hearing is that they're in the tens of thousands of dollars. It looks like lecanemab is north of $25,000 per year, and donanemab is north of $30,000 per year. And that's only for the cost of the medicine. And so when the patients show up at the infusion center, the nurse's time, the equipment that's used, there's added costs that go into that. And then for the safety protocol, there's a number of brain MRI scans that need to be done along the way. And so when you add up the cost of all those things, it's a lot of money.
Barbara Penn. Barbara?
Okay, here. I have a question. You said there was two insurance companies that cover it. Is Medicare one of them?
Yes, it is. And that is good news because most of the patients who come with concerns about memory problems are on Medicare. But they were the first to make the announcement that they will cover the cost of this treatment. And HMSA was the more recent company that announced that they'll do the same.
Okay, thank you.
You're saying it's only 20% that they cover, or?
Yeah, my understanding is that in general, Medicare covers 80% of the medical expenses.
80% coverage.
So the patient is expected to cover the remaining 20%.
Yeah, that's traditional Medicare. Yeah.
Any other questions of Dr. Chung? Oh, this is very hopeful. We want to keep in touch with you, see where it goes and where Queens goes with the testing that you're doing now, whether we can see treatments that come down in price, but also increase in coverage as well.
That's right. I'm seeing one other question in the chat about TRICARE and the VA. And I'm not familiar with that system, but actually the VA hospital system was one of the first with Medicare to offer coverage of this treatment. But what I heard recently is that with the VA system, they are not offering the treatment here in Hawaii, that they have certain centralized locations that offer this treatment. And so if the patient has to go to the mainland every 2 weeks or every 4 weeks for the treatment, that's really not a viable option. So I'm not sure if they're still offering to cover the cost of the medicine, but there are logistical issues that's going to limit people from being able to take advantage of their offer.
Okay, any other questions of Dr. Chung? Okay, well, thank you so much. We really appreciate the update, and we hope to keep in touch with you as well.
Absolutely. Thank you again for inviting me.
Thank you. Okay. Next up is Tani, who's going to give us an update of the awareness campaign. Tani Salazar from EOA. Tani.
Aloha.
Aloha.
Can you hear me okay? Mahalo. Big thanks to Dr. Chiang for such an excellent presentation. I think he really presented such complex topics, on treatments, the risks and benefits so clearly. So we really appreciate him being here. I'm screen sharing our slides. Can you see that? Can you give me a thumbs up if you can? Awesome. Mahalo. So today we heard from Dr. Chiang, and I'll do a brief update on the public awareness campaign, and then Kobe Chok from Alzheimer's Association will give an update on their legislative priorities, which work really well with the update from Dr. Chiang on these early treatments. So big mahalo to all of you at Kupuna Caucus and the legislature for your leadership, advocacy, and support to raise awareness on Alzheimer's disease and to educate the people of Hawaii. 3 of my own grandparents lived with dementia, and I wish I knew back then, that dementia wasn't a normal part of aging and that there was something that we could do. And now there are disease-modifying treatments, and we're excited to get this message out there to instill hope and to encourage people to get screened because it's worth it. So let's recap where we've come from and where we're going. You've advocated and you've passed legislation to appropriate funds for this campaign. We've done research on lessons learned from other campaigns and used that to plan for the procurement. The competitive request for proposals was done and Anthology Media Group was awarded the contract. They are currently in the market research stage, which will inform the creative development, the creative testing, the production, and then the launch in early 2025. And this is just a brief snapshot of the quantitative data that Anthology has collected thus far via a statewide online survey to learn about the perceptions of Alzheimer's in the public. 83% of people have not had a cognitive screening done with a healthcare professional. And only 1 in 10 people have had a healthcare provider speak with them about risk factors associated with Alzheimer's disease. 98% of people feel that Alzheimer's disease is very serious or somewhat serious, and 4 in 5 people were very worried or somewhat worried about developing Alzheimer's or another type of dementia. The majority of people think that it is likely that they will develop Alzheimer's or that someone they know will. And this is shown in the 2 blue tones on this graph. So this shows that the campaign message is relevant to people in Hawaii. The first steps that people would take if they notice cognitive symptoms are to schedule a medical appointment, which is good news at 86%, to research the disease, to start a log of symptoms, or to ask other people. In purple, these are some key messages that Anthology tested and are exploring further for the campaign. They speak to the importance of early detection for timely medical interventions to slow the disease progression, as Dr. Chiang talked about, to improve quality of life and empower families and reduce the risk of dementia. People turned again to healthcare providers or to the Alzheimer's Association as a first source for information about Alzheimer's disease. And these are the types of media that people use daily, which tells us where to place these messages for the campaign. Again, these are our next steps. They're doing interviews, focus groups. In the interest of time, I'm going to move ahead. Let's see. So this is an update from 2024. Although the large-scale campaign is still underway, we have been busy getting this message out to the public. Much thanks to our partners, many of whom are on this call. Over 5,000 people statewide have received education about Alzheimer's through our CDC Bold Grant. About 150 people have participated in the coalition to collaborate on the state plan implementation, and we're so thankful for your partnership. And PSAs have been airing on television as well as streaming online for almost a year now, reaching 850,000 impressions every month. And here are two of the latest public service announcements created by Hawaii News Now, and the other one by Spectrum Reach on early detection and brain health. But I'd like to show one, it's only 30 seconds of the PSA. If you can give me a thumbs up if you can hear it, okay. Okay, I'm seeing a thumbs down. Thank you, Barbara. I'm going to re-screen share and ensure that we have the sound in there. I appreciate that feedback. Okay, here we go.
Experiencing memory changes that disrupt daily life? Difficulty with familiar tasks? It could be Alzheimer's. Talk to your healthcare provider. Early detection can lead to a better quality of life. Get screened. You're worth it.
So much thanks to our valued partners for helping to put the PSA together. And with that, I'll pass the mic to Colby Chalk with an update from the Alzheimer's Association.
Aloha, everyone. Thank you, Tani, for all of your hard work. All of the things that you see that she presented is mainly her leading all of these things with the ADRC campaign and ADRD campaign, and it's just great work all around. So today I just wanted to speak a little bit about our legislative priorities. We kind of reviewed it last time before we had the voting, but just wanted to go through and kind of tie it back into what Dr. Chung presented. Go to the next. Here we are. So as Dr. Chung mentioned, Alzheimer's disease is kind of a continuum. It's not just one day you don't have it and the next day you do. You begin with the asymptomatic area of this continuum where you have no symptoms, but there may be things happening in your brain. And then you proceed to the MCI due to the disease. At this stage, you'll see some cognitive ability loss, but it usually won't interfere. And then you move into the mild area, and then all the way to the far severe end. In this little box that you see on the screen is that area that Dr. Chung was mentioning, that you need to be able to catch it in this stage to qualify for the treatments. And right now, with current practices, that's not always the case, because in most situations, the primary care physician is the first line of defense. And because of just the history of this disease, not having any treatments, not having much that you could do about it previously, there isn't much training on how to diagnose, what to look for. And now that we have treatments available, our big push is to make sure that people are being assessed early so that they have options on the table. So our policy priority is to standardize cognitive assessment at annual wellness visits for those over 65. We say at least the mini cog tool, but we're not specific on what the tool is because there are several out there that are validated. So in the bill, it's just going to state a validated cognitive assessment tool. And we are going to have the Executive Office on Aging collect data that the health systems and our doctors send over to them to give us a better picture of where people are being tested, what tests are being used, and really where the disparities are across our communities. So far, we drafted a bill, have submitted the proposal to Kupuna Caucus for consideration. Hopefully it's in the bill package. We'll see in a few minutes. And we'll go to this next one. I'm just trying to keep it moving along so we have time for some other things. But the other resolution that's going to be later, I just wanted to bring it to everyone's attention, is we're going to request that the University of Hawaii at Manoa investigate the feasibility of establishing an Alzheimer's Disease Research Center here in the state. There are 32 of them across the nation that are NIH funded through the National Institute on Aging. And these centers do great research specifically in Alzheimer's. And because of our unique population here, Pacific Islanders, Native Hawaiians are at the greatest risk of developing early onset at even age 55 here or younger. So having this population that we do here, we could really benefit from having federal funding flowing in to fund research for our population. And with that, I just wanted to thank everyone for your time and for all of the great work you do.
Okay, are there any questions of either Tani or Colby? Thank you, Colby. Thank you, Tani. Any questions, anyone, on our Alzheimer's plan or our campaign to educate early detection, early testing?
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
Garner Shimizu, the bill proposal that you just shared, Kobe, regarding mandatory screening, do you have any like costs associated with that?
No, the only cost in the bill is for the Executive Office on Aging for the data component. There's no other funding in the bill because of the requirement. Essentially, we're sticking it with the annual wellness visit only, which is a Medicare covered visit where people go for, uh, I guess, mostly risk screening to make sure you can prevent or catch things early. Currently, the guidelines already include a cognitive assessment in Medicare. However, it's very broad and vague. So a lot of physicians stick with observation, and if the patient looks cognizant, then that's it until next visit. And really continuing that until the patient has something obvious would be too late to qualify for any of the treatment. So we're just specifying that within the cognitive assessment already built into that billing code, there's actually a brief test, which takes a few minutes and consists of a 3-word recall and a dragon clock.
So is that going to require buy-in from the insurance company?
No, because there's no additional billing code. It's already in the Medicare billing code.
Okay, thank you.
So Colby, just building on that, I see the bill, or not the bill, but the concept was submitted. But I'm not sure whether there's actual language that you've drafted as to what this as you say, you're not, it's pretty vague at this point. There's nothing concrete that you need that can specify there's a standardized procedure as yet. So, so what is that bill, or how is that bill framed, or you would want it framed so that it would develop a standardized procedure? Is that what you're saying?
So the bill essentially just says that at the annual wellness visit, covered by Medicare, that the physician would be required to conduct these assessments. And that's essentially what the standardization is. Not specifying which assessment, as long as it's a validated cognitive assessment tool. And we worked with Rep. Chun's office to draft specific language. You got it back, I think, the week of Thanksgiving, and then we sent it over to EOA to review. So once we get their feedback, we're looking to submit one more revision back, and then we'll share it with everyone.
Okay. All right. Any other questions of either Colby or Tani?
Yeah, thanks for doing that, Kobe. I think that's a good thing for us to know. I mean, I'm
You're right.
65.
Okay. Well, thank you all, Dr. Chung, Ani Salazar, Colby Chak, for the presentation. And
Thank you so much for the opportunity to share.
you.
Thank you, Senator.
So we're going to move on now to what people have also been waiting for, is the 2025 Kupuna Caucus bill package. We had 168 people who responded, 166 people who responded to all of the 15 proposals, assessed the proposals, and Charles is going to share with you all of the 15 proposals. And they are ranked by the number of votes they got. So the top 5 is the caregiver tax credit for family caregivers. Then there's the increase for Medicaid for in-home services, enhancing the senior-specific housing programs such as rent supplement, the need for food security for Kupuna, and that I think will need to be worked on a little bit more because SNAP benefits are federal. So we'll work with the developer or the proposer of that bill or bill proposal, and the Medi project that EOA submitted. And you can see all the other proposals and the votes they got. Kobe, while the one that you're talking about, the standardized cognitive testing is not top 5, it really should continue to be worked on, because even if it's not part of the Kupuna package, many of our members are listening in and can support the program or the initiative, the bill that you have going forward. So you could have time to present to us again and let people know what the bill is when you get that finalized. So are there questions? What we're thinking is in the next phase of this is to go back. We're going to go back to the proposers of these initiatives and finalize what the actual bill would look like. Some of these are pretty general, so we're looking at what the problem is and what the proposed amendments to law would be, or what the program is that's being submitted. So there'll be another round, I think, when we come up with something more specific to have you look at it, to have the Kupuna Caucus look at it again. And I think some of these, Kobe, Corey, you're working on, for example, the Alzheimer's one. So there may be bills already in process. Yeah, you want to say anything?
Oh no, I was just gonna say, you know, similar to last year and years before, just because your bill did not make it in top 5 does not mean you know, we're not gonna support it. Or there's no chance of it passing, because you know we've had bills that have been further down the list that have passed. In fact, just as recently as last year. So yeah, just continue on. You know, really the 5 bill limit is just something that's a rule for the caucuses. But that's not to say that your issue is not important. So yeah, keep working with it. Find the champion and keep moving forward.
Yeah, and it is, the 5 bills are, because we have a limit in the House of 5 bills, we're limited to 5 bills for the Kupuna, so-called Kupuna package. But as Corey says, we will include all other bills, and if you need help in introducing any of these bills, please let us know. We are available to help, and other representatives and senators. I see Brandon Elefante on, and who else is on? Rep Perez Amato on, and so I think that if you bring, and Representative Shimizu, that bring it forward to us, and we can also have discussions. We could keep a little bit of time in our monthly meetings. We meet every Friday at 2, where we could use some time to discuss some of these proposals, but it is in the next month really where we start moving ahead with the bill. So if you can start working with your legislators or people who you're working with, or let us know, we can proceed to get some bills drafted, and at least drafted and introduced for discussion. Any questions? Anything anybody wants to add?
This is Stanley Michaels from Fall Prevention, and I want to thank everybody for their support, and we'll continue to move forward. Sorry to interrupt.
No.
I'm only on the phone. I didn't have Zoom today.
Okay. All right. We see you. I mean, we hear you.
Thank you very much, and thanks everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Anything else? Okay. So I'm going to move on then to announcements. Our next meeting. Oh, do we have anybody?
Barbara Penn had a question.
Oh, who had a question?
Barbara.
Barbara?
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh,
okay.
yes. Hi, it's Barbara Penn.
Hey, Barbara.
My question is now, can we get a copy of what you just put up on the screen that
Email.
listed all of those? How can we get a copy of that?
You're on our email list. We could email it out.
Yeah. Okay, perfect.
Share it.
Thank you very much.
Okay, anything else? Anyone else? Okay, so the next meeting, January 3rd, same time, 2 p.m. on Zoom. And we will hear from the Office of Healthcare Assurance, and they've been going through a number of revisions to their office. So it's very positive, very person-oriented approach that they're looking at now as they do their inspections, and some of the concerns that they found in their inspections would be very interesting. And we'd like to support them in some of the kinds of recommendations they may have coming forward after their review of their program. So please join us for the next Kupuna Caucus, January 3rd. And if you have any other issues, ideas, anything you'd like us to discuss or get speakers to help us get more informed in areas, Dr. Lewin, maybe you have some areas that you
Yes. I do have, I'm ready to circulate fairly soon, but some ideas on prior authorization certainly will be important for Kupuna. Figuring out a way to kind of automate the process, use national standards to demystify it. There's just a whole lot of issues for Kupuna in terms of coverage denials. So it's a timely topic, and I think some people are working on various angles of it. I'm looking at a way to actually automate the process, and I'll have more for you on January 3rd.
Okay, great. And so maybe we can have a presentation by maybe February. I mean, if you'll be ready by February.
Sure. Yeah.
Some input by then, that would be great.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Well, thank you all very much. Merry Christmas. We were not going to see you till January. Happy New Year. Thank you all for joining us, and Rep Chen and me. So we really appreciate your continuing commitment and support for our elders.
Aloha. Thanks, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you.